Hey TV fans, Board Now back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about True Detective Night Country episode 2. It is called part 2, so full spoilers as always from the start of this review. And this is where by the end of this episode the two investigations come together. The one involving Navajo and the girl from the past, and the current one involving the scientist and Jodie Foster's character of Liz. Liz finally gets over her ego and admits that there does seem to be a connection between the two cases, so she agrees to work with Navarro, and they have a moment of sort of truths where Liz is like, we solve this case together and then we go a separate way. So there's some progress by the end of this episode, which is good because I think the dynamic between those two characters and their history and differences is the most intriguing thing about this show, really. And it's why I found this episode quite frustrating, because we saw them do like the two investigations separately, and it was just frustrating because I think them together is like probably the strongest thing about the show, and it feels like maybe the show can finally kick into high gear, when they are together. So it just felt a little bit plod in this episode because of that. And the other thing is, I just think some of the things which were sticking out a bit in the first episode, where they weren't too bad but they just looked like they could be issues, were a lot worse in this. I felt some of the stuff was a bit too on the nose. I think some of the music was a bit on the nose in this episode. I didn't really think that in episode 1, but it stood out a bit more in this episode. And also I think the Liz character started to grate on me in this episode. Obviously there's this sort of trope with recent HBO style shows, and it's a bit the Mayor of Easttown style trope, where that character played by Kate Winslet was very like disagreeable, very sort of antisocial, and constantly had a bit of an edge about her. But in that show the character worked perfectly because you could still see her value to the town and what a good like detective she was, and there was definitely layers to her. So in that show it wasn't really a problem, but in this episode particularly, the Liz character did start to grate on me. It felt like they were making her moody, and some of her outbursts just felt a little bit forced in this episode. A bit like the opening where they're looking at like these bodies in the ice, and for some reason the rest of her squad are like messing around, taking selfies, stuff like that. And I think it's maybe meant to just show that these people sometimes don't take these cases that seriously. Like one of them says, come on, you've got to unwind and stuff like that, but in that scene you are with Liz really, because that is the wrong time to be goofing around. But that moment where she has that outburst is a bit of an example of what I'm talking about. But this episode is a little bit plodding, does drag a little bit at times. We get other certain stereotypes with the Liz character, because at one point we find out she's having a relationship with the Christopher Eccleston character, who he's the superior at the police station. But there's this whole deal where originally Liz's unit weren't supposed to be taking the case because it's not their jurisdiction, but then she goes above the Eccleston character's head, and I can't remember the detail, but she finds a loophole and she like takes the case anyway. And I think because she has the bodies moved to like this location, this local ice rink, which is almost a little bit of a joke, them being stored at an ice rink, and it's outside of them playing hockey games because they use it for hockey games. But she forces his hands and goes behind her back, and it's the first appearance by Eccleston in the series, who's doing a decent American accent, I've got to say. It's a bit distracting because I know it's Christopher Eccleston, but compared to some Brits doing US accents, it's not too bad. But we get a bit of a frosty, like, back and forth between them, and then it turns out later they're having a thing. Privately, they're having, like, a sexual relationship, and that just felt like another soapy moment which you didn't really need in this sort of episode. But the investigation is moving a little bit slowly, so as I said, they moved the bodies to this ice rink because they need a place to store them. And Liz, I think once again, is doing this thing of, well, this is the way it's going to be, like, I need a place to store them, and because she knows the owner of the ice rink, and they have a history, and the history mentioned later is that she had a thing with the husband, like the ice rink's owner's husband. Now I don't know if that's going to turn out to be Christopher Eccleston or not, but later on it's played almost as a gag. It's like, well, why is she so pissed at you? And Liz says, I had a thing with her husband. But that actress I know from something as well, the ice rink owner. I couldn't quite picture it, but once again she's ruffling some feathers with this. I do quite like the touch of them moving the bodies to this ice rink. It's almost like a fun little gag. But slowly the investigation moves along because they start seeing similar markings to the markings from the past that was left on the victims, and also the link to, like, this culture. And we find out at one point in the episode that this culture dates back a very long time. Like, we're talking pre the current kind of modern era, if you like. And we get a bit more from, like, the younger detective who is, like, the deputy, and we find out that his father, the John Hawkes character, Hank, his name is an abusive father pretty much, because at one point when Liz has, like, forced the deputy to stay out overnight and not be with his family, not tuck his kids in and say them, like, a bedtime story. And this gets her heat with the wife of the deputy. And Frank comes to the ice rink because he sees his son still working there, and he does this whole speech about, you have a family and Liz isn't that, and to some extent this, I mean, he's overstepping the mark because the guy's an adult, but up to a point the speech he makes is a good one and is valid, because it does seem like Liz takes him for granted and just expects him to be there beck and call, and it is part of the work, but definitely it's something that they could leave till morning. But you have to have boundaries. But what tips it over the edge is when Hank, the John Hawkes character, hits him, like literally hits his adult son, and that tips us off then, okay, there's a bit of an abusive past there. So I don't mind too much this idea that Liz is maybe in some ways the only, like, solid family this guy has, apart from his wife and kids, obviously, or kid, I think it was one kid, but almost like maybe she's been there for him all these years because he comes from an abusive past. And that moment with the John Hawkes character, that is one of the things he does really well as an actor, where he's very good at coming across as a very, like, everyday sort of guy, but then out of nowhere you can see just a darker side to him, and he'll suddenly, like, snap. And just how eerie, like, his face was when after he hit him, and he has a real edge to him, but he has a good way of bringing it out without it feeling, like, unnatural. So that was quite a good little scene. So just talking about the narrow stuff a little bit, because she goes to the Fiona Shaw character, who tells them more about, like, what happened and the ghosts, and again suggesting then she not only saw the ghost of Travis that night, who she saw hours before, so his death is a recent one, but also then she sees ghosts in general, and she seems to be. She makes a lot of cryptic comments, which I wasn't that keen on. It was a little bit annoying, a little bit cliched, this scene, but she suggests that there's links to the two cases, and that she's been seeing ghosts for a very long time, and again that this legend goes back a long way. So that starts leading Navarro to reopen the investigation. There also is suggested that there might be a link between Navajo, her sister, who has like a drug problem, drink or drugs, one of the two, I forget, and also this stuff with the ghosts. And it's implied that the sister might see ghosts as well, but the Fiona Shaw character dismisses that, and I guess this is one of the themes they're poking at. Is she says at one point, she has a line about there's a difference between mental health and ghosts and supernatural, something like that. But she dismisses this idea that the sister is acting out the way she is because of ghosts. She thinks it's just a mental health issue and she needs medication and to stay on them. But that's something you could see them exploring, because otherwise it does make the sister subplot a bit, well, we're just doing another subplot because it's tied to one of the main characters. Whereas if they actually connect it to the ghost stuff, then that could be a bit more interesting. But you have some more stuff with that. You have more stuff with Navajo and a boyfriend, her on-off boyfriend, who again, a bit like, there's a little bit of a link between her and Liz, because it does seem like she's taking advantage of this boyfriend. There's another unnecessary kind of soapy moment, which is a fight in the bar, which involves her boyfriend because he's working there. And it's to do with tensions over the town and the water, and once again it's getting into some of the racial stuff around the town. So there is some link there. I just thought it was a bit of another over-the-top type moment. But Navarro ultimately goes back to the guy because he can help her a little bit with the case. And the other stuff, when it comes to the Native American stuff, is then Liz's character, her, well, adopted daughter, Nira, I think her name is, Lyra, that's it, Lyra. Well, she's more interested in exploring her Native American roots, and we see that Liz is against this, and we see more of Liz being cynical about this stuff, and probably because of the past. Like, my take on it is then, because Liz probably didn't do everything she could to investigate the past case, or at least has some doubts over whether she did and has some guilt, then that's why there's some guilt when it comes to the daughter, and maybe why she wants to have her shy away from that stuff and her heritage, and makes her want to just move forward and live a more Western life, if you like. Because there's a scene where she's over at the house and she's painting her face, and the foster character barges in and is like, no, what the hell is going on here? And she makes quite an aggressive remark about, I don't want her involved in this stuff, like such and such. And again, it does make Liz seem like a real arse. But later on, Liz's character, she puts the face paint back on, keeps it on, and there's quite a nice little scene with her, and I think it's Pete, like the deputy, and reflecting on their two different paths, because they find some common ground, and that's quite a nice scene. But the cliffhanger of the episode, which comes at a point where Navajo and Liz have decided to work together finally, is then one of the bodies has moved from the ice. They come along, and this body of this character Clark, who seemed quite involved in this stuff and the science, because there's little bits about what they were doing at one point, and the talk then potentially they thought they could like cure cancer, but there's this suggestion then someone interrupted the bodies on the ice, and also then there was something with them on the ice, like it wasn't just literally them going out to die, or because there seems to be interference in certain things on their bodies that feels like someone was with them. But anyway, by the end of the episode, Liz gets the call and the body is gone. It's disappeared. So whether this is going to be more supernatural stuff, you would think it is, because they seem to be going down that path, or something else. We'll wait to see. But that's the episode. That's the cliffhanger to the episode. So I wasn't so keen on this one. It did have its moments, but overall I think I much preferred the first episode. But like I said, now that Navajo and Liz are working together, hopefully we'll get focus, and that does seem to be the strongest part of the show. So we'll see where that goes for the next episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below of this one. Like and subscribe as always. Share us out on social media. You can also support me for just $1 extra a month at patreon.com/boardnow. You get a bunch of extras, including movie and TV commentaries. And just mentioning other TV related stuff, me and Rachel McDonald at the moment, we're doing our special top 50 TV characters lists. I'm not quite sure when the next part will be, but part 1 is up now, so if you want to go and check that out for more content. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys again soon.